Shelter from the Storm, written by Ellie Dean, read by Julie Maisie. The moral right of the author has been asserted. Prologue. Portsmouth, November 1942. April Wilton clung to the side of the motor torpedo boat. They were racing across the choppy grey waters of the Solent, testing the engine that she and her fellow maintenance wren, Paula Sims, had just serviced, and she was filled with the exhilaration of the moment. She had been feeling gloomy since her few hours of home leave the previous day, but now she was determined to keep cheerful. April's fair hair was whipped by the wind as the sea spray flew from either side of the MTB and sparkled like jewels in the weak wintry sunlight. She'd started out on her journey home full of excitement, in the hope that her mother would admire her smart uniform and be proud of her. This longing to have her mother's approval had, however, ended in the usual failure, and no compliment had been forthcoming. The sad truth was something April could no longer deny. Mildred Wilton was an exacting, selfish woman, forever finding fault and bemoaning the hardships of war, as if they were a deliberate assault by the combatants on her comfortable life. But then, Mildred could always lay the blame for whatever ailed her on someone else. April knew she should just accept that her mother would never change, and not let her spoil the wonderful new life April had discovered. "I'm glad to see you've cheered up at last," shouted Paula over the healthy roar of the MTB's engine. "Was the trip home really that bad?" Despite her resolve, April felt hurt all over again as she remembered the indifferent welcome she'd been given by her mother. She nodded and shrugged. "Mother was preoccupied with the new stock of hats for her shop, and after hanging around a bit to listen to her usual gripes about the lack of materials and the uselessness of her hat makers, I took myself off and visited a couple of friends." Paula sighed and patted her shoulder. "Parents can be very difficult, can't they? Father spent most of my day's leave shut away in his study. Still, we're free of all that now, and doing our bit. Life is exciting, isn't it?" "It certainly is." April gripped the handrail tighter as the speeding boat was taken into a sharp turn that, in less capable hands, would have seen them in the water. She grinned back at Paula as their hair was whipped from their faces, the spray splattered their oilskins, and the wind snatched away the possibility of any further conversation. April revelled in the marvellous sense of freedom that always came when she was out on the water. Life in the Women's Royal Naval Service was exciting and fulfilling, a world away from the stifling atmosphere at home and the strictures of boarding school where she and Paula had forged their close bond. She hadn't regretted a single moment since she'd first heard the lecture from the recruiting officer who'd visited the sixth form and seen the poster that exhorted her to join the Wrens and free a man for the fleet. She and Paula were both 18, and had enlisted on the same day almost a year ago, following a short course at a secretarial college to fill in the time between school and the adult world. They'd been friends since they both started at their private school, for they not only shared a love of books, cinema and dancing, but soon discovered that their childhoods had been similarly unhappy. Paula's mother had died before Paula's 6th birthday, and her father hadn't known how to deal with his own grief, let alone that of his young daughter, and had immersed himself in his work, leaving Paula to the not-so-tender mercies of a hatchet-faced, coldly efficient nanny during the school holidays. April's father had succumbed to a heart attack shortly after her 9th birthday, and she still missed him. Sadly, they hadn't been particularly close, for his strict upbringing meant that he kept any emotion in tight check beneath a rather formal veneer. Yet he had cared enough for April to have been a buffer between her and Mildred. Mildred's attitude to his passing had been one of undisguised relief. She was determined to make good use of the money he'd left to forge a new life for herself. She had never told April much about her life before marriage. April had a vague idea that her mother had been a secretary, but now Mildred launched herself into a new career as the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?